really comes down to how you want to represent yourself, your personal brand. It's a lot of choice, and especially in the world of counterintelligence, recruiting spies. Because again, think about this: is anyone in any line of work? It's all about trust. And if no one understands exactly who you are, and you're being deceitful and you're being deceptive and you're using a pretext or you're using all these hooky spooky spy things, no one's going to trust you.
Our guest today has an incredible story. He went from recruiting spies in the FBI to recruiting allies in business. He is an executive coach, best-selling author, professional speaker, podcast host, Marine Corps officer, and a retired FBI special agent, aka the chief of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. I'm pretty sure if they made a movie about him, his character would be played by Daniel Craig. Yes, that is a James Bond reference. We have a cultured audience, so I think they already knew that. Welcome to the show, host of Forged by Trust, Robin Dreeke.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me on, and thanks for the Daniel Craig reference. He is actually my favorite Bond. It used to be Roger Moore, but now it's Daniel Craig, no doubt.
I'm with you, yeah. And I have to admit, I didn't see the Bond movies like when they came out. I kind of recently went back through all of them whenever they hit Netflix or whatever streaming service they pop up on. So I just recently watched Casino Royale, probably for the second time ever. And I know a lot of people have probably seen that movie 50 times. I agree. Daniel Craig is the man.
I love Skyfall just because it's an aging Bond and he's roughly the same age I am. So I really like that one identify.
You can relate with it. Super exciting story. I want people to know they can check you out at peopleformula.com. All your social media links, I got clickable. I know you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. I got that for our audience so they can check it out. And before we get rolling, I just want to start with one thing real quick and give you some love here, a little shout out. So Forged by Trust, man, you're in the top 5% most downloaded podcast in the world. So I want people to check out your show. It's a quality podcast. And then your two books are doing really well. Sizing People Up and The Code of Trust both have over a 4.5 star rating out of 5 on Amazon and nearly 500 book reviews, which is not easy to do. So congratulations, brother. That's awesome.
Thanks. And just to give one more shout out on that one. So the one that doesn't get picked up as much is my first self-published book, it's called It's Not All About Me. That's got close to 1,200 reviews. And actually that one for a self-published little book has outsold the other ones by double. So it's crazy.
Is that kind of your origin story, though? You think that's why it had more attention, or just the first one? So
it's a smaller, quicker read. That's what I think it is. 25,000 words. It's 102 pages. And I think people just want a quick in and out. And it's all about quick rapport. So quick book,
Very
quick
cool.
rapport. Yeah, it's fun.
I'll get that in the show notes as well. What was that one called?
It's Not All About Me. The top 10 techniques to quick rapport with anyone.
That's awesome. That's what we're going to be talking about. Rapport, a lot of obviously behavioral prediction and behaviors and just in general with sales and relationships. We'll get into that in a little bit. I'm super excited for this interview. I know we're going to cover a lot of ground in a short period of time. And here's the thing. It's not just for me. I know our audience can benefit. We have a lot of early stage startup entrepreneurs, business leaders, executives, and everybody can really learn from this, from the family element to the business side. So I'm going to be your first audience member. I'm going to kind of kick back and take a lot of notes. And I know I'm going to go back and listen to this one multiple times. So let's kick right into your early days. Robin, I want to get into some early influences with you. And what did you have? Did you have a dream to get into the FBI and be a special agent? Was that something that was on your dream board as a little guy, or did that kind of come later on? How did that whole thing unfold?
Yeah, not even close. Each of us have, and I know you've seen it with all your guests that you've had on and your amazing show. Everyone has a thread in life. And so it's about pulling that thread and understanding what the thread is and taking them on that journey. So yeah, my journey was like everyone's. It started at a young age and it weaved its way through, except I thought I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, Navy pilot, and astronaut. That's what I wanted to do in life. Well, the challenge with that is you don't let someone have to take the SATs 7 times just to get an application at Naval Academy, major in aerospace engineering. So before that, I needed to recruit allies my entire life. So that was really the thread. I grew up in a place where neither of my parents had a college education. They worked very, very hard for very, very little. My parents still to this day have never owned a home. and we rented a small house. Multiple times we moved because when the rent got raised, we had to move. I grew up south of you. I know you're upstate New York. I was lower upstate New York, but still above New York City, so we call it upstate.
Right.
On a lake in the middle of the woods. And one winter, going into winter, the furnace in the house broke. My parents called the landlord. Landlord said, I can only fix the furnace if we raise the rent. So my parents took their last $400. They bought a wood burning stove, and I started chopping wood. And I chopped wood from seventh grade on until we moved from that house. And so the first winter we ran out of wood. And so I literally had to chop wood all night long to keep the house from freezing. In the mornings when we got up, we had to get a chisel and a hair dryer to unfreeze the door because the condensation, because we kept plastic on the windows to try to keep the heat in. The condensation would drip down the door, the sliding glass door, it'd freeze at the bottom. So we had to literally chisel our way out because the house got below freezing that night on the inside before we could start the fire. So that was the resiliency. And if you're going to move forward in life, you better start recruiting allies. And so it just followed that thread.
Well, I think what's interesting in that story is that, you didn't have this silver spoon situation. So you learned how to
close.
be, not even close, but you learn how to be tough in life, which is an important thing. It's not that you say, hey, we want our kids to go through adversity, more adversity, feed them some adversity, but it is good that they do have some, because as you go through life, it will help you, especially as an entrepreneur. It's inevitable that you're going to run into adversity, and how do you handle it? And so as a little guy, you were resourceful, you were helpful to your parents. You maybe, of course, didn't love it in the moment, but you got through it, and family is the first team we have in life, and you were a big part of being, in that and helping out, and I think that's really important. But what I also think is interesting, before you even talked about that, is you mentioned about like dreaming to be an astronaut and pilot and all this cool stuff. I mean, those are big dreams, and I feel like a lot of times, whether it's in school, sometimes unfortunately it could be even our own parents that they don't necessarily talk us directly out of it. That could happen, but they kind of like give it that pass of like, okay, like, but what about for real? Like, what do you want to do for real? Maybe be a police officer. You know what I'm saying? So, was that supported in your family, even though you were kind of doing all this crazy survival mode? But was that supported?
Yeah, so the first thing that was supported was going to Naval Academy. And that's because if I went, I'd either go into the Naval Academy, which is a service academy, which was paid for, or nothing, because we had no money. And so I did get in the Naval Academy. It took me an extra year, and as I said, I did major in aerospace engineering, but that went sideways after 1 year. So I had to drop that major, admit defeat. And that's probably the toughest thing I ever faced at that point in life, because I had grown up with this belief that if you work hard, you can achieve anything. Because I was, and that is very entrepreneurial. And when you're talking about entrepreneurs, yeah, what happens with us, because a lot of entrepreneurs grow up with this kind of resiliency, tenacity, grit, and you get addicted to movement, and you get addicted to being in charge of your own life. And so that was my addiction. And so my addiction was I wanted constant movement, constant activity, constant go, 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 go. And the first time that you faced a failure, like, no, you're failing out. If you don't drop this major, you're going to get kicked out of this place. And so it was saying to yourself, because no one was telling me you had to do this, it was all my choice, that you have to shift. Then my eyes went to 2030. I could no longer be a pilot. I mean, everything went completely sideways. So I wanted to go Marine Corps instead of Navy pilot. And I go to Paris Island. So the Marine Corps was life changing. It was defining, because all these things. So for the entrepreneurs out here, here is the greatest challenge with this grit and tenacity that you'll face in life, as I did, as many people do. Those things are fantastic resources, but they're also part of a dichotomy out of balance. And dichotomies, we have them all over life. Jocko Willink and Leif Babin talk about it in the dichotomy of leadership. He wrote Extreme Ownership. These things are fantastic things, because all life is a dichotomy between good and bad, hard and soft, all these things. Well, one of them is actually between self and others. And so people that are tenacious, have grit, resolve, all those things that you experience because of hardship and trying to survive and feel safe, it makes you really, really self-centered. Not in a narcissistic, look at me, I'm great way, but in a survival way. So then when you hit the real world, when it comes down to leadership and making it about others, being of service, there's a lot of behaviors that aren't there just because you didn't have reps in them. Mm-hmm. Life is about pound, as the author Joshua Medcalf calls it, in his book, Pound the Stone. Life is about reps. It's about mastery. It's about putting in those reps to do that. You as a podcaster, you put in a lot of reps to get good. No one's born great at anything.
Right.
And so we have to start bringing that dichotomy into balance between a lifetime of self-reliance and resilience, which is very entrepreneurial, to now what new behaviors are going to add to ourselves to make sure we can balance it out so we can be of service, so we can lead others.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I definitely like Marine Corps. I have a couple friends that have been in it. One of the guys actually, Robbie De Niro, not to be confused with Robert De Niro, the actor, but he started his own CrossFit gym, and everything all over on the walls has a bunch of sayings and like old, almost like tribal. It has this tribal feel of like the Marines, and once you're in, you're always in kind of thing. But he brings that mentality to everything. And the number one thing that I see in him that I know directly came from that is discipline. He has a gym, but he also like he'll plow driveways in the winter to make extra money too. And he's like the first one up, last one to come home, and then he's working at the gym in between shifts of that, and he's just there. And he's like a rock. He's there every day, that kind of thing. And I know he learned that. That's in the Marines and stuff, and he was there for 14 years. So it wasn't a short stint. Walk us through kind of the transition there. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit of, hey, it wasn't all roses. I mean, I had the situation where I was pretty much on the, hanging on to the rope there to try to make it work. And then you ended up pivoting a little bit, which is totally part of your story now. And then how did you get into being a special agent, and what the heck does that even look like? Because to me, I'm interested in a picture like, you see in the movies, you got to go to all kinds of training, and I'm sure you do. But how does someone there's got to be a mental exam. What does that look like going into it? Can you share that? I don't know if you can even talk about it.
Exam. Yeah, if it's mental exam, they would have disqualified me.
You would have been out, yeah.
No, so I was really fortunate when I was at Paris. So my last duty station in the Marine Corps is Paris Island, South Carolina. I was at boot camp, basically, where I was it's called the series commander, which is equated verbology wise. It's kind of like a company commander. At any one time, I had about 240 Marine Corps recruits and about 16 drill instructors that worked for me. The recruits I was responsible for, they actually were the drill instructors, the one that were in charge of them. So I had a lot of people I was responsible for. And there was a phenomenal experience when it comes to leadership and really knowing how to make it about others, and discipline, intensity, really, really good lessons. I did that for about 2.5, 3 years. And when I was getting ready to leave Paris Island for my next duty station or get out of the Marine Corps, a recruiter for the FBI wound up coming down to Paris Island and said, hey, he gathered up all the Marine Corps captains that were thinking about getting out. And he says, I think Marine Corps officers make great FBI agents. If you come with me, I'll guarantee you there's 3 phases to the onboarding at that time to the process. And he says, I'll guarantee you I'll get you through phase 1 to phase 2. Once you're at phase 2, it's on you. And it's like, well, that sounds pretty good. I'll go with this guy, because I was looking at, going to corporate America. I had interviewed with a bunch of different companies through a headhunter, and it was fine, but nothing really excited me. I mean, I had dedicated my life to that point of service to my country.
Right.
And working for a uniform supply company just wasn't exciting me. And I looked at going into law enforcement in the sense of like being a state trooper, local law enforcement, I had applications to, I think at the time Rhode Island was hiring state troopers. I looked at that and I was like, I think that phase of my life of kicking down doors was over, because I was almost 30 years old, and we wanted to have kids, and so I was like, something different. And then my wife had applied to the FBI before I did, and she was interested in it, and so I went with this guy, and I had no idea what I was going to do in the FBI. And my wife and I made a pact that whoever got in first won, and then the other loser, although it was the real one, got to stay home with the kids. And so I wound up getting in before my wife, and she said, I want to stay home with the kids. Thank God, because I would have been a horrible mom. And the funny thing is, I still to this day, I still think she would have made a much better FBI agent than I would have.
Wow.
So that's how I got in. And then it was just training through Quantico. So I was back at Quantico again, because I did a lot of Marine Corps training there. I was at FBI training there. It's literally right down the street from it. So very familiar. I still had no idea what I was going to do inside the FBI. Nothing was really exciting me. White collar crime, I thought, okay. Organized crime, okay. But then I got assigned to the New York field office when I graduated because FBI training is about 4 months long or 5 months. I don't even remember how long because that was back in 1997 is when I went in. I get assigned to the New York field office. And I growing up in New York during the days of Son of Sam and all the horrible things in New York City, I grew up saying to myself, I'm never going to drive in New York City. I'm never going to work in New York City. And first place to get assigned as an FBI agent was New York City.
New
So
York City.
I got to drive to Lower Manhattan every day, battle the traffic. I lived in Westchester County. I was never more flat ass broke in my entire life because a government employee in New York does not get nearly enough to live and survive.
Interesting. Wow. Now, were you were undercover too, right? When you're a special agent, you're not.
No, so boy,
you
that's
don't wear
a
your
real.
badge outside, right? Like if you're just hanging out in a subway or something,
No, you
people wouldn't
don't, but
know.
you
They wouldn't
can.
know. Yeah.
So being an FBI agent,
Maybe better. What would you think? Is it better for your safety if you were marked? I guess they would call it, right?
it's really comes down to how you want to represent yourself, your personal brand. It's a lot of choice, and especially in the world of counterintelligence, recruiting spies. Because again, think about this: is anyone in any line of work? It's all about trust. And if no one understands exactly who you are and you're being deceitful and you're being deceptive and you're using a pretext or you're using all these hooky spooky spy things, no one's going to trust you. And that's what you learn on the job doing this kind of stuff is you learn what works and when you learn what doesn't work. And so there's no rule book says you can't say you're FBI. Some people when they first come in, their egos get in the way, and so they try to shy away from it. They try to think themselves special. I'm not going to say anyone I'm FBI. I'm going to say something really cool. I work for the Department of Justice, and no one will figure it out. What are you nuts? Well, once you get over yourself, it's easy.
I would think that they'd have the opposite, like very strict rules. This is what you have to say if someone asks you a question. You have to like answer it by the book. So that's kind of interesting to me. I'd love to talk to you. Probably a whole nother podcast episode if you'd like about the details of that. And I'd like to at least cover maybe a story or two here today while I got your
Sure.
time and attention. And I appreciate you being here with our audience. You just said the word trust, and that's actually something that's huge. I know in your books and in a lot of your coaching as well. And you talk about behavioral prediction. We'll get to that next. But since you're talking about trust, what are some of the telling signs when you're assessing like who you can trust or who you can't trust? What do you see? Is it body language? Is it certain things to look out for verbally? Is it a mix? It's got to be a mix of everything, right?
Yes. So I'm gonna talk really briefly about the really simple core of what you're looking for and what all human beings want in every single human engagement, and that is they want to feel safe. Because if you feel safe, you can trust the environment you're in that I'm not going to die. Because our genetics and biology are always going to do really simple things. They're always going to be acting in our own best interests in terms of our own safety, security, and prosperity for ourselves and those we care about. So, what makes human beings very predictable, all of us are extremely predictable. Everyone is going to always act in their best interests in terms of safety, security, and prosperity from their perspective, from their optic. That's empathy. So, if you understand what they think it's in their best interest, you now know what they're going to do. The key is how much trust can you develop so they'll share that with you so you can understand it, so you can watch, observe, be present, and do those things. And the other thing that I never was taught in the Marine Corps or any other place, when I started learning how to shift that focus from myself to others, and this is a really key thing, language is so paramount and key when you're both trying to be trustful as well as trying to assess trustworthiness in others. And that's language. And that is how well does someone make it about the other person? So in order to shift the focus from yourself to others, and when you're shifting that focus, you're demonstrating that you value others, that you see them, that you're curious about them. Their brain starts rewarding them with dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. All the pleasure centers in the brain are firing when you're doing one of these four things, as I call the four keys of communication. One, you seek their thoughts and opinions instead of sharing your own. Two, you speak in terms of their priorities, challenges, and pain points instead of your own. Three, you validate them non-judgmentally. And what validation really is at its core, you are curious. Every time you hear something you don't necessarily agree with and aligns with anything in your life, that's when you dive deep and you get curious without judging, because that's what everyone's seeking. And finally, four, you empower them with choices. You do one of those four things and everything you say, write, or do, the entire shift goes from you to them. Their brain rewards them for engaging with you, and then you're on your road to making great trust and recruiting great allies in life.
And to me, that's amazing. And I'm going to go back and listen to that. And I encourage the audience to go back because there's a lot there and it was really good. Obviously, if you want the full, couple 100-page version of it, it's in Robin's books, but that was really well said. Thinking again of I want to make sure I got the term right. Behavioral prediction, right? That's all
Sure.
ties into this, right? So now it's like anything. There's genuine, being a nice person, a good person, and asking someone a question because you genuinely care about them, or doing it to maybe manipulate the situation, almost like what I would think, like if somebody's trying to diffuse a situation, whether it's in the special forces or someone's jumping off a building and you got to kind of talk them down, and you're saying very specific things on purpose
Hmm.
for that situation, and whether you care about what the person says or not, it's not really the number one focus. The focus is to get them to behave in a certain way. Somewhere in sales, there's kind of you can say what you want to say to kind of work the situation in your favor. I'm obviously against any of those tactics. But what you're talking about is actually to be used in a genuine way to get to know somebody better, to get them to know, like, and trust you more, but to actually trust them as well. And it's a dance, right? It's not just learn these four things and you can get anybody to trust you. That's not really what you're saying, correct?
100%. You have to have what's called congruence. You
Yeah,
need congruence between your words, thoughts, and deeds. And that congruence, if you don't have it, you come across as the creepy salesman. And
exactly. Yeah.
everyone, and you start sending off red flags because our body picks up on red flags really, really well. And what a red flag is for us, that creepy feeling, is when there's incongruence between someone maybe knowing the words to say, but their body language is incongruent with it. You can tell they have an agenda. You can tell they're on a tempo and they're not sharing why with you. All these
Mm.
things share incongruence. In other words, there is an agenda that you're unaware of, that they're not willing to be transparent on. That's manipulation. And we are really good at picking that up and those red flags. And so congruence is paramount. And so, how do you feel congruent with people that you might not agree with? That's your job. Dive deep, have that curiosity, because it goes that old adage: walk a mile in someone else's shoes and see what decisions you'd make. So the only
Right.
way you can do that is to have a great discussion, be curious, and see what those shoes that they were walking in were like.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that you said, there's the four different angles of it, but one of the four was asking questions when you're not familiar with something instead of like
Hmm.
maybe, and there's so many different things, whether it's politics, it could be anything from sports teams to how you're raising your children, what school they're in, and you could say the wrong thing and offend somebody, or just make them upset or whatever. And I'm not even talking about like being easily offended here. I'm just talking about you may say accidentally the wrong thing and somebody gets upset. But what you're talking about is when you actually are asking because you want that knowledge so then you could better understand someone. And I think that's a beautiful thing that I'm encouraging more people to do, is even if you disagree with somebody's stance, try to understand it. And I think it's a beautiful thing if you can respectfully disagree. Fine. Not everybody should be the same. We're not robots. We're not all here with the same exact opinion. But I think that's the one thing I'm taking away here, is like to really get to better understand who you're talking to. And I know exactly what you're talking about, Robin. When somebody is in congruence, their language, their verbal language, their body language, and the way that you're feeling are way out of whack. I'm thinking of a very particular person who, when they talk to me, they're saying one thing, and then when I respond, you could see their interest level is just not there, and they said it just because they wanted to like keep the conversation going in their favor, but they
Right.
didn't truly care about the information, and it doesn't make you feel good. And I'm sure there's a lot of people like watching this right now, nodding their head, like what that feels like. And I will even admit, I'm going to be super transparent. I've accidentally done this to family. I'll be thinking about business. Sometimes at the dinner table, a deal comes through, falls through. I'm, meeting or whatever gets rescheduled. Something happens, and I'm thinking about that. And it could be like, my sister's talking about my niece who's just born, something important. And it's not that obviously that's super important to me, but I might not be mentally present and physically there, kind of thing. And that can look like Mike doesn't care, but it's just that my brain is somewhere else. So you got to be careful and like maybe identifying it. And I also need to also remind myself to do this as well, right? So these conversations, this is why I love podcasting. One of the benefits is, like I said, man, I'm the first audience member today. learning a lot from you. And I know we got some more to talk about. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick 2-minute timeout. We'll be right back with Robin Dreeke. Do not go anywhere. We got some more interesting stories about the FBI that hopefully he can share. I didn't prepare this with him ahead of time. So, Robin, if you say no, let me know. But we're going to take a quick timeout, get into a little bit more of Robin's backstory. Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight. And Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting. So what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. Hey guys, it's Mike. I'd like to give a proper shout out to Navigator Bookkeeping. Look, for a long time, I ran my business without really understanding the full financial picture. I used my gut and my bank account balance to make decisions, which led to some poor choices and constant stress over my business's finances. I knew something needed to change. At the beginning of 2021, I made a decision that helped pave a more clear path for my business. I started working with Navigator Bookkeeping. Since then, my bookkeeping has been handled for me. I now understand the full financial story of my business, making important financial decisions much easier now, and it helps me plan for where my business is going. I highly recommend giving Navigator Bookkeeping an opportunity to help your business. Check them out at navigatingyourbooks.com. Again, that's navigatingyourbooks.com. It's time to know the full financial story of your business. All right, we're back in action with Robin Dreeke. Remember, you can connect with him on social media. I do have his website clickable there as well, peopleformula.com. You guys can check that out. And his books are linked. His podcast is linked in there as well. So what I teased before the break, Robin, is talking about a little bit of your career as a special agent in the FBI. And I'm personally wondering, I'm sure our audience is with me on this one, just to hear maybe one of your favorite or two of your favorite moments working in the FBI, how crazy that must be. But also, is there something that feels surreal that replays in your head? Kind of like, man, I actually experienced that firsthand. Is there anything like that comes to mind?
You know, favorite's an interesting word.
Because it might be a bad situation, so that might not be favorite.
Would connotate joy. There was just really profound moments, and I had a lot of profound moments. And every time you threw out a different kind of caveat on there, different images would pop in my head. I'd say probably, but the one I'll say was most surreal was probably 9/11. Because I was in New York during 9/11. I was on the street when the first plane hit 5 blocks away, because 26 Federal Plaza is right down there next to the Trade Center on Broadway. And I heard the first plane hit when I was on the street. I looked up, I saw the first little hole. I go up to the 25th floor in my building, because that's where my office was. And I had a line-eye view right at the North Tower as the North Tower smoke and everything was spreading. And I remember looking around and looking at my friends, and we're chatting about how they're going to put that fire out. And all of a sudden, that big, massive fireball comes through after I counted 8 people jumping from the North Tower from my vantage point.
And that was before the second one was hit?
Yeah, I counted 8 people from my vantage point that had jumped from the North Tower before. And that's when the second fireball came through the South Tower. And right behind me right here, this is a piece of glass from the World Trade Center, from Windows on the World, because we did a lot of work down there. And so it was a defining moment. It was surreal because it looked like a movie set, but it was as real as it gets. And, from the people on the streets holding up signs, please find my daddy, please find my mommy, and then please save America, to what we did every day to try to do that. It was profound, impactful.
Yeah. Oh man, that's crazy to be there firsthand. Was your phone automatically ringing with you? Did you have like start a new mission right there as far as the things that you had to work on?
Yeah, it's a great question. Before that, I had been doing nothing but recruiting Russian intelligence officers, spies at the United Nations, and that was then. Now we're retargeting basically, and now we're doing all we can to recruit individuals that can help protect us against threats from the Middle East. And
Mm-hmm.
I had reached out to one of my Russian sources and said, "Hey, in a book, his name's Leo. In real life, his name is Michael." I said, "Michael, time for new folks." And he literally within a month came up with an individual that is a very close relative of a leader of a Middle Eastern country. And we created a back channel of information between the two countries so that CNN wouldn't get him thrown out of office for actually cooperating and helping us out. And then Donald Rumsfeld was the Secretary of Defense at the time. And some of the information I was providing, actually, I got a couple of direct responses from the Secretary of Defense asking follow-up questions. So that was pretty that was memorable.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I talk a little bit about, so you're recruiting Russian spies, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they're actually Russians. They're not U.S. spies going to Russia. It's actually Russian spies. And where
Yep.
where are they spying? In Russia? They're here. What does
So
that
so
look
90
like?
so 95 to 98% of the Russian intelligence officers that are spying, they're actually diplomats at diplomatic establishments around the countries in the world. In the
Yeah.
United States, they house mostly at the embassy down in Washington D.C. and in New York, they're at the mission to the United Nations and at the consulate and other different organizations. So generally, these are Russian diplomats that are under diplomatic cover, and they're under diplomatic cover. So if they're caught doing something illegal, they don't get thrown in jail. They get exfiltrated outside. They get basically kicked out. They get
Hmm.
demarche, or what's called persona non grata, and so they're thrown out of the country for doing bad things.
Wow. Interesting, man. So this is where all this behavioral stuff, I mean, you're putting it to work, and you learn these skills directly working with people, for many, many, many years. And all of this is something that's really cool that you learn professionally. And now that you're doing coaching as well, right? It's not only the books, but you also have coaching in your podcast. So very interesting about the, interviewing and recruiting Russian spies. There's so much there that I don't really know a ton about politics because I try to stay out of it, but to understand what was going on at that time pre 9/11, and then obviously the paradigm shifted and what you were focused on, which is interesting. Can you talk a little bit about? And I don't want to get into conspiracy theories or anything like that because that's not what the show is about. But legitimately, like, can you share why you feel, because you were right there to see it, and if you
Mhm.
worked just at a hot dog stand down there, I'd ask you, what the heck do you think you saw happen? But Building 7 completely goes down like a
Mhm.
demolition, and a plane did not strike the building. What do you think happened there? Just curious.
I have actually, I could pull up a picture of it right now. I actually have a picture of Building 7 at 6:30 at night on 9/11. I took it from Broadway, looking west as the sun was setting. That building came down because of all the debris that hit it.
Okay. So
It's literally, I mean,
it was kind of crossfire of
it
more of
was
that.
gutted from the debris of the other two towers coming down, and that was on day one. I mean, most of the buildings around World Trade Center were condemned because of all the debris. That I mean, you had two massive towers completely collapse and implode. The debris field was massive. I still have no idea how we cleaned up New York City from that. I mean, I thought you were literally wading in debris and paper and concrete silt that was up to your knees for probably about a quarter mile within the site
Right.
for weeks, months. It was tremendous, and so the force of those buildings coming down, not just the debris coming down hitting those buildings, but the air mass that came down because of that amount of displaced air, was the stressors it put on buildings was unbelievable. My building, I was in 26 Federal Plaza, which is about 7 blocks away, maybe, and sheltered by other buildings between the Trade Center and us. And when One World Trade Center, the North Tower came down, my building was shaking as if we had just gotten hit by
Like an
a,
earthquake. Yeah.
of Richter, Richter's scale 10. It was. I thought we got hit by a truck bomb when that building came down.
Hmm. Man, that's crazy. And then the actual, I didn't know we were going to go here, and I didn't intend on it, but
All good.
the way that the towers fell seemed also. I'm not saying it's staged, but was it an intentional mechanism so that when if there was something like this, like a terrorist attack or a
Mhm.
plane that went on a whack or anything, who knows what could have happened, but you don't want the building to fall left or right because it's going to do way more damage than if it just. So, do you think that's why they felt like that? Because they obviously looked very much like a demolition way that
Yeah,
they had fallen.
so the way they designed those buildings was really ingenious, and so if you remember the facade on the outside of the trade center is these big long lines, and it's actually a few of the iconic photos. That was part of this superstructure that's still intact. That those buildings were designed to flex with wind and everything else, and so they were pretty malleable with wind and everything,
Yeah.
and really the tensile strength was huge. And so what happened is when the planes hit that building, that jet fuel got ignited and then started going down and weakening the internal structure of the buildings, and so it collapsed from within inside itself because they were designed not to fall over. Because I mean, those things are designed; those are huge sails in the wind that were designed, I think, to like 100, 2 to 300 mile an hour winds. And
Hmm.
so they're designed to take a huge impact on a huge broadside. So a jet plane going into one spot, it's not going to knock over that tower. The jet fuel then pouring in and burning from the inside is going to weaken that structure from the inside. That's how it collapsed that way. And I'm not an
Right.
engineer. I'm just telling you what I saw and what we heard when we were
Yeah,
there.
you were physically there seeing this. So I'll take my tinfoil hat off for a moment here. We'll get back
Hey,
to the
and I'll
show.
tell you, when I came in the FBI, I was a conspiracy theory guy too. I came in right when Flight 800 went down, and I said we took that. I was sure as hell that we shot that plane down. The Navy by accident. And then once you come inside the government and you start seeing all the people that are part of investigations, and then you quickly realize there's no way that people wouldn't leak information. Nah, if it was conspiracy, it would have leaked out. Because who in the government can keep a secret? No one can. So no, we're good.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm usually not in that boat, but I like to find truth. And so if there's someone like yourself with high integrity that I could talk to, I'm gonna get it from you, opposed to
There's
someone who says,
nothing ever saw that says anything but it was what it was.
"Cool, man." I appreciate you opening it up because um, I'll let anyone who hears this go back and make their own opinions based on that information. But I appreciate you sharing that. I know we're running out of time. You got to run here, so I'm going to hit you with one last. It's not designed to be a curveball, but really kind of just open up your put a bow on this conversation, if you will. And you're obviously the author in many great books, and they're doing extremely well. But think of it this way for a moment. So you're the author and protagonist in your own life story, and you get to write the ending. And God willing, you continue to live a long and prosperous life. You're looking back on it, you're reflecting on it, and you get to define your legacy. What would that be?
Great father.
Great fathers, most important to you. Yeah,
Yep, that's it.
that's
I just
awesome,
want to be a
man.
good father, a good friend, and a great husband. That's all that
How
matters.
old are your kids?
My son's 20. My son's 23. My daughter's 25.
That's awesome, man. Now, you're a young dude, but it's crazy how quick time goes. My daughter just turned 8, and I feel like she was
Mhm.
born, 2 weeks ago. So it's gone very, very quick. And now that my niece is the same, so they actually were born very, very close, 6 pounds, 15 ounces, and holding her, it's just like brought all those flashbacks back. But before you know it,
100%.
man, 25 years old. I used to think if you had a 25-year-old, you got to be ancient, but not really. I mean, you're in your late 40s or 50s, and there's a lot of people that are just starting their newest thing in life at 45, 50 years old. Go for it.
I'm mid 50s. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's awesome, and I encourage anybody who's listening to this to realize, look at Robin's story, man. He had these cool dreams as a kid. He went for it. He didn't have the story of, the education or like a family that's kind of saying, "Hey, we got it all figured out for you. Just don't screw it up." Everything that you got, man. I want you to reflect on this after you jump off the call here. You made it happen. Yeah, there's definitely people that you want to say you can say thank you as the mentors, and that one agent that came to you and said, "We'll get you into the first situation, but then the second part of training, you're on your own." There's different things that definitely happen that you can tip your cap to. But really cool that you made a lot of that happen. So I'd like to have you on the show again, and we can talk a little bit more in detail about some of the newer things you're doing with coaching. Any last words you'd like to say before you run?
100%. The only thing I want to say, make sure you check out his podcast. If you liked it, hit like button, share it with friends, family, you name it. Mike puts a lot of work into this show, and you show him some love and show him how much you appreciate what he does and the great guests he has on, because it does take a lot of work to be a great resource for others. And so as he's a resource for you, be a resource for him.
Best $20 I ever spent. Just shoot me your shoot me your Venmo, and I'll take care of you, Robin. No, I appreciate you that brother. And same thing, guys, to check out Robin's show. This is a unique conversation. So if you're tuning into this show for the first time, maybe you're interested in Robin's story, check out some of the other guests. Like I said, we got entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, authors, Olympians, and just a vast, just so many different industries, but people that have these incredible stories. And Robin, your story's incredible. And I really appreciate your time. And I always end every episode with this: be great and be grateful. And I'm grateful for you, brother. Thank you so much for your time today.
Likewise, Mike, and thank you.
I'd like to give a huge shout out to everyone for tuning in, especially those who listen all the way to the end to hear this message. Seriously, I appreciate you, and my guests do as well. Giving a quick reminder to subscribe to this show. It's completely free and will allow you to receive notifications when new episodes are released. If you'd like to provide a tip as a gift, you can do so via patreon.com/mikedup. It's spelled MIKED up. Patreon.com/mikedup. You can give as little as $1 per month or as much as you'd like. Every dollar is greatly appreciated and completely unexpected. Appreciate your reviews and your messages coming in on social as well. Keep them coming. Your feedback is valuable and absolutely means the world to me. You can check out more episodes and content at mikeduppodcast.com. We're powered by Social Chameleon. You can also follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active, and it's at Mike DiCioccio, MIKEDICIOCCIO. Thank you so much for your continued support. You guys know what to do. Be great and be grateful.